John, I'm back in the cave.
He's back. You are back in the cave, in the recording studio.
Yeah, that's what it's a much better calling the recording studio. It does. I
There
don't
you
want to
go.
look like some like a prisoner of war like camp
Like a
here.
padded
It's
cell.
just
Right. My name is
or
Scott
like
Chris.
crazy. Yeah, like I'm in the sanitarium here.
Well, you're in Chicago, so
Same thing.
it's it'll same thing. Yeah.
Same thing. I was just telling John about my neighbors downstairs who decided to throw a party again. And
Mm.
I couldn't be in the normal location, which is, my beautiful desk, whatever, with mesh and bone branding behind us and everything. But now we're back, and I've been relegated to the cave. But
Yep.
welcome everyone. We had a couple weeks break. That was completely my fault. I was on
Yeah.
vacation.
Yeah.
So thanks everyone for tuning back in. John, how you doing tonight?
I live vicariously through your vacations. So I had a great time. I watched some Italian movies and felt like I was nowhere near Italy, but yeah, good. No
You
complaints
got in
here.
this. You got in the spirit of Italy out in
I
Vegas.
got in the
There's a lot
spirit
of
of
good
Italy.
Italian.
Did.
There's the Bellagio, right? Which is
Oh, you can just great Italian, great Italian. One of my very good friends who's Italian chef, and yeah, she did a little bit of Italian, but here in Vegas, it's the monsoon season.
yeah.
Okay, and we've talked about this, right? Because it's like the rainy season in Vegas, but because Las Vegas has a flair for dramatics, they call it the monsoon season,
Oh
which
yeah.
means like periods of like 5 minutes or 10 minutes of heavy downpour.
Yeah.
But they call it the monsoon season. Like we're my friends in India, it stops it rains for like 2 months straight,
Yeah.
which is like a proper
Yeah.
monsoon. So we've had a little bit of rain here in Vegas. Temperatures are starting to cool down. We're going into September. It's
Got
getting a
it.
little nicer. Still lots of pool time left to
Yep.
go.
Yep.
Yep.
And you're
Nope.
you're
Nope.
you're doing well. I got to say, man, you're surviving the Vegas summer
Oh
with a
yeah, yeah,
smile. So
yeah. Oh
congrats
yeah.
congrats on
As
that.
long as you got two things, AC and a pool,
Yeah.
you're
You're
golden.
set.
You're
Well,
set.
speaking of vacations,
Mm-hmm.
travel, motion, this week's episode is really exciting. It's summer, which for a lot of people means vacation and getting on
Yep.
planes and trains and automobiles. And this episode's all about movies and travel. And I was just out, as I mentioned, out overseas for a couple weeks. And I can tell you, the movies, some of them are complete phonies about travel, and some are real. The one that is the most real has to be Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which talks about the hardships of trying to get from point A to point B. But John, the travel movie is a unique form in cinema. And when you think travel movie, what do you think about?
Yeah, that's a good question. When we had this topic, it really got me thinking because travel can be so many things, right?
Yeah,
You've got like sci-fi, you've got fantasy. But when I think about travel, I think about, I go back to like my days as a kid, right? Like family trips, right? Getting in the car, my mom and dad and sister, and going on road trips, or it's traveling to distant places in Europe or Asia, wherever you're going. One of my travel movies is about the storyline about the either the trip is the story
yeah,
or the scenery in the background of where the characters are going is interweaves and becomes part of a character in the movie. I think we've got some good examples of that that we'll talk about.
yeah. I saw there's movies that are specifically about a journey, you know,
Mm-hmm.
traveling.
Yeah.
Movies like, as we talked about, Vacation, National Lampoon's Vacation with
Oh
Chevy
yeah.
Chase, which is truly that family road trip, and they do it
Oh
so
yeah.
well. And then you
So
have
well.
movies that are just shot on location
Mm-hmm.
in a city or country. Some that come to mind are like Lost in Translation. For many people, that
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
Tokyo, or Midnight in Paris. Obviously, that's about Paris. So you have those that are more location based, but inspired travel,
Yeah.
inspire you mainly to go to
Yeah.
that area of
Yeah.
where it was filmed and the lifestyle around it. But when I think of travel movies, I tend to think about ones that are actually about travel, not like a Discovery Channel, but those that show all the trials and tribulations of any type of transportation.
Sure.
And those seem to resonate, especially with me, especially in these like post-COVID times where getting on a plane or getting through logistics is a movie in itself, man. I tell you, like we could, I was on these fairs, and I don't want to sound like, oh, woe is me, I'm on vacation. So I'm very fortunate, very blessed. But I was on this ferry in the Amalfi Coast in Italy, and it was rocky seas, and you have and it's freaking like 100 degrees, and there's all these tourists, and a lot of people are getting seasick because of the boat, and it just looks like a freaking plague had hit this boat, and you're sitting there, and you're like, wait, everyone's paid for this. This is not like a refugee boat leaving a war-torn country. These
You're
are
in the
actual,
Amalfi Coast. I mean, the Amalfi Coast,
yeah,
right? So
and you're
beautiful.
like, people are paying for this, and
Right.
it's so funny when we exited the ferry. I was like, this could have been a movie because people are like, I will never take that ferry again. I will never do this again. I'll never. And I was like, dude, you never even had to come. This was a vacation. This was purely voluntary. So
Yeah.
that movie with Steve Martin, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, where if those of you haven't seen it, it's all about getting from point A to point
Ah,
B and all the crap that can go wrong. But then,
yes.
obviously certain movies, one of the old ones about Odysseus, the Odyssey, Homer's epic poem, to me was, very, very inspiring about how to go on adventure and
Mm,
whatnot. And even as you mentioned,
mm.
science fiction movies. But what are the major elements, John, of a travel movie? If you
Well,
had
for
to like
me,
kind of like, bucket these.
yeah, I think for me, a travel movie is a movie where like I look at you said, Lost in Translation to me isn't really a
Yeah.
travel movie, right? It's
Yeah.
a movie shot like in a city. But I think about like a really kind of a classic movie from 1956 was Around the World in 80 Days,
Yeah.
which was a
Great movie,
great
man.
great movie, really good movie. Starred David Niven, Charles Boyer. I mean, had
Yeah.
so many people that were in it, and it literally is a film about this guy Phineas J. Fogg who travels from, London, circles the globe, and ends back in London to win a bet, and he has to do it in 80 days. And you go through all these different countries. They shot. I think I have some notes where they shot in London, Madrid, San Francisco, Hong Kong, Thailand, Paris, Tokyo, Pakistan, and India, and they shot on location in all these areas. And it was like a travel journal
Yeah, it's
of this
amazing.
guy traveling around the world. And at that time, people had never even seen films of like Pakistan or India. So it was
Yeah.
really kind of breakthrough. And then, so to me, those are movies where you get to go to places maybe you haven't been. But then there's the movies, like, I mean, my favorite, like National Lampoon's Vacation was like one of my dad and I's favorite films to watch together because we took so many family trips together and all the shit
Yeah.
that goes on
Yeah.
in a trip, like the ferry, right? Or like me
Yeah.
eating too many Nilla wafers in the back seat and barfing over my sister at Big Sur, like those kinds of things happen. And so when I think about the personal things that happened traveling, because my parents loved to travel, so shit always went sideways.
Yeah.
And so those kind of movies that bring those memories back about travel, the hardships, the just the funny stuff that goes on, things that you laugh at years later, like vomiting on my sister.
Yeah.
It's really funny now. Back then,
I'm
not
sure
so
your
cool.
your dad wasn't thinking that as he has to clean up all the chewed
Oh, my
up
mother
Nilla
was thrilled with
wafers.
me after I ate half a bag of cookies and projectile vomited as
Oh
we went
yeah.
over Big Sur.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so those are things, I look back in my childhood, and I think about those kinds of things. And National Lampoon's did such a great job, like bringing that in a really over the top way. But movies
Yeah.
Around the World in 80 Days is a really great example of
Yeah.
a movie really that really did it well.
Well, there's some that show the more adventure side. As I mentioned,
Mm,
the Odyssey, which is with Kirk
yeah.
Douglas, very classic tale and
Yep.
movie. But then you have some like Into the Wild, which
Mm,
bring a
yeah.
dramatic element in there.
Yeah.
Has that adventure component of hitchhiking, going from RV
And an amazing
camping.
soundtrack too, by the way,
Amazing
for that movie.
soundtrack,
Amazing
amazing
soundtrack.
visuals, and just the area that the young kid travels to.
Yeah.
with a very kind of dark, a little bit of a dark story,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
definitely that travel is
yeah.
the hero of the story, and
Absolutely.
it's literally the Into the Wild, the title itself.
Yeah.
There's others that I thought were small travels, but um, Up in Thin Air, which is about climbing
Yep.
Everest, or these that have these kind of challenges. They're not travel as opposed to recreational travel, but I saw, it's just a wide category. But I think that the theme that I found in most of these, and including those that are shot on location where the place is the hero, as we mentioned in one of our previous episodes, is that ability to inspire some type of get out of your couch, get
Mm.
on a plane or get on a train, to inspire travel. And I don't know if if you uh, in your examples, if you've had one, if you've had a movie that said, "Hey, I watched the movie and I just went. I had to go to this place, or it inspired me to buy a plane ticket."
Yeah, I think one of the movies that I loved, believe it or not, was another old film called North by Northwest, Alfred
Yeah,
Hitchcock film from 1959, starring my favorite actors, Cary Grant, where he travels. It's a movie about a man who's been framed for a murder he didn't commit, and I always wanted to go see Mount Rushmore. And I never had seen I'd never been to South Dakota. I'd never seen Mount Rushmore before. And Carl and I watched it, God, years and years ago. We watched that movie. And I said, we have to do a North by Northwest trip.
yeah,
And we basically took the route from Chicago to Rapid City. We drove it. We didn't take the train and the way that Cary Grant did it, but we drove like that same kind of path to
yeah,
go see Mount Rushmore. And that movie kind of inspired us to take that kind of North by Northwest route to go see Mount Rushmore, which I'd never seen. And until I saw
yeah,
that movie, which wasn't, the actual Mount Rushmore. Obviously, they couldn't shoot on location there because they wouldn't allow them to. But that did inspire me to
yeah.
go and see that. I'm not as suave and as cool and as good looking as Cary Grant, but I did my best.
Hey, man, that's it's just
Yeah.
respectable. Well,
Now,
that's
now,
I
now
mean
you
that's a
now
good
you on
example.
the other hand, you just had a great example of that. I think you should tell
Yeah.
our folks listening your example because your example is epic.
Well, I want to say epic. Maybe it's epic light, or
I think it's
it's a
epic.
baby epic. But as you know, and I've mentioned, I'm fascinated with ancient literature, such as the Iliad and the Odyssey. That shit that they try to make you read in literature class, which at the time I hated it too. It just looked like a horrific book that was in this a very annoying poem format. But as I got older and I was traveling and I went to these countries, and you realize the books are really part of the culture, and you see buildings and paintings, and you just can't avoid some of these characters like Odysseus or Ulysses, whatever, and all the stories about the Trojan horse and all that. And one of my favorite movies was 1981's Clash of the Titans, starring Harry
Mm-hmm.
Hamlin as Perseus, and it's all about the Greek gods, and it's all about this journey to go basically save a princess, right? A time old tale. And so when I was actually in living abroad, I actually went to Greece and I did the whole like travel tour of here's where Odysseus went, right? So you basically replicate his journey from Turkey all the way to the Greek islands to mainland Greece. And it was just fascinating to travel and follow the story. So they would
Mm.
say, and who knows if it could have been all bullshit, but here's where, Zeus lived. This is Mount Olympus based on this, there's a Starbucks nearby conveniently. But, so that Greek literature was very inspiring to me. In the movie where Kirk Douglas burns the eye
Yeah.
of a Cyclops, the one-eyed
Yeah.
monster, all these like classic tales. There's Jason and the Argonauts, all this kind of Greek history. But Clash of the Titans was one that was, somewhat based on these Greek myths. And recently, when I got COVID, right, this is 2020, and I got it originally like from China, like the freaking pure stuff. And that's an inside joke. But I was very sick, went to the hospital and everything, and I watched this movie. And I said, if I make it out alive, I'm going to go to where they shot this, because there's a famous scene where Perseus goes to Medusa's lair, right? I don't know what you call it, where a snake, maybe a snake pit, and beheads Medusa. And it's actually shot in a place about maybe 3 hours south of Naples, Italy, in the very south of the boot, if you know Italy. And it's called Pastum, right? That's the site, and it's the scene where Perseus defeats Medusa. And I went there just last week, and I tell you, John, not only did it get me to get off my butt and actually get on a plane, but it was just in the middle of nowhere, and I'm just thinking about this movie. And it was, and you and I talked about it, it was really this um, inspiration to why we do this podcast, why how these movies can inspire action, and not only just traveling, but traveling for a purpose. As you said, you went out and tried to replicate the North by Northwest. Well, this was me trying to be a middle-aged Perseus, right? Definitely not as good looking, and more like a homeless looking Perseus with a, and I didn't have the head of Medusa, but I had this backpack that had the strings, right? Like kind of the straps, sorry. And it looked like kind of the gizzards of a freaking head. I don't know what you would call it, but when you chop off a head, I guess it's not very clean, or you have. So anyway, so I sent you a picture, John, of me as Perseus did holding up the head of Medusa, but it was an REI backpack. So that was my little story.
It was awesome. And after that, Scott is now known as Perseus at our house.
Yeah.
Because that was just I wish we had that picture to show, because it was so good. You have to put up on social media because it's so good. And the thing is, it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Like the column,
yeah,
it looks the same, only you're just not in a red toga. You're like in shorts and a t-shirt. Yeah. But it looks, like exactly the same. Like, oh my God. Like it hasn't changed literally at all.
It's pretty amazing the influence of these movies. And we talked a little bit about those that are shot on location. And there's so many. There's so many. Yeah. For example, I was in Sorrento, which is a beach town in Italy, and there was Scandal in Sorrento, which was a famous Sophia Loren movie. And there's, and so the cities actually realize that. And so some of the cities will promote it. So I went, it sounds like I'm bragging about travel, but I'm trying to be very humble. But I went to Petra in Jordan, and that's where they shot
Last Crusade with Indiana Jones. Last Crusade, and with Harrison Ford and Sean Connery.
That's right, John. So the Raiders of the Lost Ark series and James Bond are some of those that, as you travel the world and as you go, they truly pick these beautiful sites, right? It must be fun to work on the set, or just to work on as a the person who actually chooses the filming locations. Yeah, because it's really these beautiful places. And I think, John, what is it, 100 and some countries they shot him in?
So the trivia, I looked up James Bond. I'm a big James Bond fan. Love James Bond, and he's one of James Bond series of films through all the different actors. There's been in 57 years, there's been 24 films. The James Bond has visited 111 locations in 50 countries. So, that character, it's about travel. Yeah. And there's a character that has traveled literally the globe, 50 countries, 111 locations, some of them absolutely stunning. I mean, Stad, skiing in Stad, and all these places they would go. And I mean, it's James Bond, right? But even with, even thinking about Raiders of the Lost Ark, I mean, they were in Sri Lanka, they were in China, they were in Peru. Beautiful, amazing locations. Amazing.
Now, let me say this. The one part that they don't show is James Bond having to do passport, like go through customs,
getting TSA,
go through that. Yeah, I want to see him ordering.
He's on a private jet. Yeah, he's on his own private jet.
Maybe there were budget cuts back in London, so they're like, "Hey, listen, we need to send you down to the jungles of Brazil, but you're going to have to fly Southwest.
You're going to have to fly coach.
You're going to fly coach. Your seat is 84G, and." And they never show that. They never. And I always love these James Bond movies where he carries like literally a little suitcase wherever he goes, and he happens to have a freshly pressed shirt in them,
Of course,
as we
of
talked about
course,
in our movies and fashion
of
episode.
course.
But
Yeah.
those, going back to these travel movies, those two especially, and I even think the Raiders of the Lost Ark, because it's like James Bond, they were exotic. But in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, you see a lot of the actual travel they'll show, as you even
Oh
said in the
yeah.
Maltese Falcon, or no, I'm sorry, Casablanca. They'll
Yeah. The
show
plane.
the plane,
Yeah.
and there's just something. And I think it affects and it influences it. I think that the key insight is it has influence on tourism.
Yeah.
These movies drive so much, you're almost not sure if it's sponsored by certain countries tourism
Yeah.
boards, but they
Yeah.
just have this ability, and the places know it. So in many of these locations, as I mentioned in Petra, there'll be a massive sign that says "as seen in
Yeah. Yeah.
Last Crusade," or "this
Yeah.
is where James Bond." And I think I was telling you, I was even in Pompeii, and this is not film related, but music related. Actually, maybe it's a mix, but Pink Floyd did a movie about live at Pompeii. They actually played there in 1972. And so when you go to Pompeii, you'll see all the, regular information boards about the site and whatnot, but that's nothing in popularity to compare to the Pink Floyd like promotions they have right next to
Yeah.
it. It's like
Yeah.
everyone's like, okay, I don't want to know about the history. I just want to know where this movie was shot at. And they'll say, this
Yeah.
is the location. And there's so many almost like pilgrims like myself. In addition to the Clash of Times, I did go to Pompeii, and I went there just because they filmed the Pink Floyd movie there. So it was just wasn't me. There's a ton of other people.
Yeah.
Um, and
That's cool. I think that's the fun thing about travel movies, Scott, is that
yeah,
they can inspire you to travel when you see these amazing locations, and especially when you love the movie and
yeah,
you see the locations, you say to yourself, "Gosh, I need to go out and see these places. I need to go and see where James Bond went. I need to go to these places and where Indiana Jones went." But
yeah,
for me, there's also that other part of travel, which kind of goes back to you know, the National Lampoon's Vacations, right? Which
yeah.
are I think I hold near and dear to my heart just because I think about. I mean, and they did travel a little bit in those. I mean,
Well,
in
there was European Vacation, right?
there was European Vacation from 1985 where they
Yeah,
went to, all over the place. And there was like the original one where they were like in East St. Louis and
yeah,
Chicago and so forth. But you mentioned the thing about travel too is that they don't show, like in the James Bond movies and things like that. They don't really show like, James Bond like getting, yelled at by a flight attendant because his bag is too big.
yeah,
But in the movies like National Lampoons, they accentuate those things.
yeah,
Like they get to the camping ground and like the tent smells like a dead body, or they get
yeah,
into a plane and the seat's too small.
yeah,
Those movies I love a lot because
yeah.
they as a business traveler, like Scott, you travel a lot for business, as do I. Every now and then things just go sideways on you,
Oh yeah,
and you have to have a sense of humor. And movies like that, especially like family trips, like I took family trips all the time as a kid, so those movies were always really funny because a lot of the stuff that happened to them on the movies happened to our family.
yeah.
And you just I love that because it doesn't hold like the reality back of travel, because
Yeah.
travel can be really hard and
Oh,
take a long time, and it could be it's just like you just want to get there. Like, and some people say, well, the trip is the vacation. Like, I don't know about that. But
yeah,
it was when I was a kid. We drive, and I love those. So those movies, like those National Lampoon movies, were always really great, as were all the other ones that we named out, because they're all, they all play a big part in travel.
yeah, yeah. I think there's that real relatability that you
Mm.
see in movies such as Vacation, your even European Vacation, that really hit it home. Yeah, I was saying James Bond. I mean, those are fantasies. Those are you say the movies, so to speak.
They're aspirational travel
Oh yeah,
times,
like
right?
yeah,
Very
you
aspirational.
never see like James Bond sitting there waiting for a taxi, or sitting there like eating a shitty meal that comes on those like plastic trays, or sitting there next to some fat dude picking his nose in the passport line,
Who
because they got to go
stinks?
through
Yeah.
the same line,
Oh, I
even if
know.
you're James Bond, right? And
Yeah.
but I think both show that side, at least the aspirational
Yeah.
side and that
Yeah.
exaggerated reality. But I love that too, and I think both um, allow you to laugh at travel in a way, because it is kind of strange when you think about it. You go through so much stress, arguing, exhaustion, and somehow every year, especially now, I read a report that people are eschewing purchases for the home,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're spending money on two things: concerts and travel.
Yeah.
And especially because it's pent up. It's
Yeah.
been pent up for a couple years. So
Sure.
despite all the lines, I mean, I arrived in O'Hare yesterday after a massive 36-hour journey, and I got to wait an hour to get my passport, stamped or whatever, signed off so I can enter my own country, and then another hour to get through customs, and then a huge wait for an
Oh,
Uber. And so you're like, why am I doing this? What's the point? And you look around and everyone's doing the same thing. And I think some of the movies have been really good at capturing that.
yeah.
But a lot
Absolutely.
of them just show the good side, right? I mean,
Of course.
it's Hollywood. We still got to realize the movies
Yeah.
are movies. But
Yeah.
well, so
No,
John,
no doubt.
let me ask you a question: is there any movie that you would recommend? One movie that you would recommend to someone who, um, let's say, is at a point in their career where they want to travel. They're not really sure where to
Mm,
go, but they want to do something.
I'll let you go first.
That's a good way. Well,
I'll let you go first. What would I do?
I would mainly ask about. Let me just say this. I'll cheat here
It's
and
a
I'll say
good
I would ask
question.
someone about like location. So they're like, I want to go to
Mm,
Europe. So I think for
yeah.
that I could almost give them specific. For example, Paris. I would
Yeah.
say, hey, well, there. I wouldn't necessarily have them watch
Yeah.
Hunchback of Notre Dame, but I would say Midnight in Paris.
Yeah.
Something that gives a little more modern view. Woody Allen production, I paints the city in a very comical
Yeah.
but beautiful way. Just like we talked about films and locations and whatnot. But I think that it has that because it's exotic, more exotic than New York or LA. I would recommend that,
Yeah.
that type of movie. But
That's that.
for
That's a that's a tough question. It's a really good question. If someone's going to travel, what movie would I send them to watch? I guess I would also ask the kind of the criteria.
yeah,
Like, are you looking for like exotic locations where
yeah,
you've never seen before? I think there's a lot of movies that fall into the James Bond era that you could
yeah,
see some amazing locations, even though they're some of them could be a little bit dated, but some of the newer James Bond movies have a lot of great,
yeah.
amazing, stunning locations, right?
Actually, that's a
Um,
great point.
yeah, I mean, some of them are just beautiful. You can say, "Oh my God, where is that? Oh, that's the Amalfi Coast. I want to go there." Or
Yeah,
where is that? Oh, it's in Monaco. I want to go there. So I think
yeah,
there's some movies that give you some aspirational,
yeah,
travel tips. But if someone just like wants to get a great laugh about travel when it comes like just being a family, National Lampoon's Vacation, the very first
yeah,
one, is like just the ultimate family travel
yeah.
movie.
It is.
It's like it's the ultimate. Like there's so many. It's like one of the most quoted movies of all time. There's so many great quotes. There's so many great scenes. It never loses. It's never dated.
Yeah.
Even though it's nowadays traveling is different because you have kids have TVs and everything in their car. But the quintessential family travel movie has got to be uh, National Lampoon's Vacation.
Yeah. No, for
Yeah.
sure. I agree. I think that one for at least domestic travel, it's
Oh
the
yeah.
best.
Yeah. It is. It is. It is. Yeah. It's so good. It's so
Well,
good.
listen, hey, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. We get you got a couple weeks, I think one more week until Labor Day. So get out there,
That's
watch
right.
a movie,
Yep.
try to avoid those long lines. I don't even know how to do it. I'd say,
I would
or
just say
just
road trip
surrender to
it.
it.
Yeah, road trip it, or you're right. Either just like get a really good sense of humor
Yeah, that's it.
and get to the airport and
Assume it will be a painful, and then when it's not painful, you'll be pleasantly
low
surprised.
expectations.
Low
Very low
expectations.
expectations. It's like flying Spirit
Yeah.
Airlines. Very low expectations.
Yeah.
And that way you're not
Yeah.
disappointed.
It's one of those with Spirit or Frontier. If I arrive, it's a win.
It's a win.
If the plane doesn't crash, it's a win.
If I don't get the plague from my neighbor on the plane, it's a win.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
It's a win.
If you're not filmed in the background of a TikTok fight in Spirit Airways, it's a massive win. So
true.
Yeah, I think Spirit Airways, that John, let's just say this, that could be a movie in and of itself. You know, I think that
it's a reality show.
we may
at least that.
I think that's it. You basically have a challenge. Who can fly in the longest flight with Spirit Airlines and have the least amount of drama?
I flew from Las Vegas to Pittsburgh a month ago on Spirit Airlines.
Oh, yeah.
And to the credit of Spirit Airlines, I survived the to and from. Yeah. I came back healthy, and I just set my expectations extremely low.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I managed to survive, and I think, I don't know what was going on. It was a miracle. It was a 1 in a million shot.
Oh, yeah.
The last time, before that, I flew Spirit Airlines and the pilot lost the keys to the plane. Yeah. And then they couldn't find the, jetway. And so
I flew on Spirit and the seatbelt wasn't working. And they're like, yeah, don't worry about it.
Just tie it.
It's just like, if it crashes, everyone's going to die. And I was like, wow,
okay.
I was like, usually they have those procedures here. They're just like, yeah, you just get on and we'll open the door and just get off. And if you have your own luggage, great. If not, just pick up any bag and
pick somebody's up.
Yeah,
just hold on to your neighbor.
Whatever
your neighbor is a floating device. Just hold on to them, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, and I always wanted to go. Where did the name come from? Spirit. Like, what spirit are we talking about here? I think it was just. I think that's a movie in the making, or at least a game show. It could have been on Fear Factor, right?
I'm so sorry, Spirit Airlines, ripping on you, but it's just so funny.
Oh, they need it. They need it. They need it. They know what they're doing. Anyways, listen, hey, everyone, have a fantastic weekend. Get your travel on, avoid Spirit, and we'll see you next week.
See you later.
See you guys.